How's it going, everybody? Chase here. Just wanted to go over one of the 2024 Winter Shipment wines, Club Shipment wines, and a new release for us, the 2020 Venture Wayward Son. So let's get into it. So while I get started talking about the background of this wine a little bit, I'm gonna pour myself some and just let it sit in the glass while we go over some of the details of the vineyard. Just give it a little chance to breathe, which is always smart when you're opening a bottle of wine. Just give it a little bit of time inside the glass. If you're really fancy and you have the opportunity, please decant the wine. That's always really helpful, right? Put it into another vessel, give it some time to open up, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. So Wayward Son, this is a Venture Pinot Noir. I started making Pinot Noir under the Venture label when I came back from Tasmania in 2015. So it started with the 2015 vintage with making Pinot Noir from the Santa Rita Hills. That vintage, we made it from La Encantada Vineyard. And then in 2016, we moved over into a brand new, newly planted vineyard, which is called Donica Vineyard. And we were one of the first, I think, handful or less wineries to be able to source that fruit and make wine from that vineyard, which is really cool. So the 2020 actually marks the 5th vintage for us of making Venture Donica Vineyard single vineyard Pinot Noir. Over the years, I've sort of played around with different clones. In the beginning, it was Clara and Swan clone. Then we just moved into a mix of Swan and Dijon clone 667. This vintage is 2 Dijon clones, which 2 sort of classic clones from Burgundy, France, 667 and also the Pommard clone. And I always tell people the reason that, not only the reason that we work with this fruit, but the reason that this vineyard is called Wayward Son is because the vineyard itself is super, super unique. It's really situated in the center of Santa Rita Hills appellation along Santa Rosa Road. And so there's kind of 2 reasons for Wayward Son. One is this, just the simple location. It's really, you look it up online, it's in the dead center of sort of the appellation on Santa Rosa Road. And there's really no vineyards around it. So it's kind of like it's separated itself, certainly just in the space that there aren't any vineyards butting up against it. And then the second reason that I call it Wayward Son is really because of the expression of this wine in the glass. Now, this vineyard is a north-facing vineyard, okay? And so that exposure, just to begin with, is very different. It's very unique. North-facing, a lot of times when people are planting vineyards today, they're planting southwest face, so it's much more exposure to the sun. North-facing vineyard is a little bit different. North-facing is, you don't get that exposure to the sun. If you have a north-facing window in your house or north-facing room, you'll notice it doesn't get a lot of sunlight or natural light. And again, that's because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So it's just really that the south is getting much more exposure than the north. So as it relates to a vineyard, you're not getting this super, super direct sunlight, which provides a little bit more shade, a little less UV light over the course of time, over the course of a growing season, coupled with the fact that there's these really like dark, kind of almost black, like clay-like soil structures. And so it's producing these wines, it's producing this Pinot Noir, and by the way, they grow a lot of other fruit, but it's producing this Pinot Noir that I find is very different from, let's say, or very unique, I should say, to the overall Santa Rita Hills appellation. Now that's certainly a generalization, but I do find Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir to often be very fruit driven. So just quite a lot of red fruit, sometimes it could be harvested earlier, more on the acidic side, sometimes harvested a little later, ripe red fruit. This vineyard from the very beginning, and I would say probably even more particularly with the heritage clones that I worked with in the past, but certainly still with these Dijon clones, you're getting this Pinot Noir that is a little bit more savory, a little bit more rugged, and I really like that. I think it creates really what we consider and what the larger wine consuming culture considers a true vineyard designate. It's like what everybody wants, right? A true expression of that site, of that vineyard. So I'll go into detail and try this wine now and talk to you a little bit more about the flavor profile. Okay, so 2020 was an interesting vintage. It was a warm vintage. It certainly wasn't the longest ripening vintage, so the fruit didn't hang as long during the 2020 vintage because it was so warm, kind of in the middle, and so it did force a lot of hands to just harvest the fruit a little bit earlier than maybe maybe we would have wanted. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I would just say generally that means that again, that fruit profile isn't going to be as intense, and you're definitely in this vineyard going to get more spices. So on the nose, kind of got this gingerbread, kind of like toasted orange. I also put a dense raspberry, but I would say that's more of like a third layer to this wine. I definitely love that this nose of more orange and more sort of citrus fruit up front. And I put gingerbread, right? Because it's sort of that almost warm spice, warm baking spice, kitchen spices. Really, really pretty nose. It's not over the top. It's not too loud. It's got this beautiful restraint. And this is a 2020 wine. It was put in bottle in August of 2021. I'd let this wine open up. I'd give it, at least ideally like 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes to decant if you can. And this wine will open up and just be drinking really, really beautifully. But taste it over the course of time, and you do that trial yourself. Okay, so in the mouth, kind of getting this, there certainly is some sort of red fruit. I do find it to be more like a red currant, so maybe not as ripe. Kind of getting this black. There's certainly a tea aspect, so a little bit of the herbal, the herbaceousness in this wine is maybe more of a black tea. Olive and herbs have been a consistent flavor profile, I would say, for quite some time. So maybe if you get a little plate of olives at an Italian food restaurant, it comes and there's like some, it's in one of those hot ramekins, and you have like sort of herbs. That's really how I think of this wine, and that's what I think is in this flavor profile. It's not overpowering by any means, but it's present. And this just, again, savory, earth-driven. It's certainly different than that bright, tart red fruit that I was talking about. I think it just makes for a very, very unique wine. I've heard people compare this to, let's say, like Oregon Pinot Noir. I don't know if it quite goes that direction in terms of the forest floor mushroomy category. I just think that this wine shows beautiful restraint. It's really pretty, and it is a true vineyard designate. Now, I think this wine is drinking absolutely beautifully right now. Has plenty of acidity. That's because that north exposure, right? We're not getting so much sunlight. It's kind of cooking the acid out of the grapes. We're retaining acidity in this vineyard. I'm certainly harvesting earlier. I think the alcohol here in 2020 made sure we harvested the right time. The alcohol is 12.7%. That is perfect for me. I think this wine has beautiful density. Wine has over time almost developed, it's not this particular vintage, but in some of the older vintages, it's almost developed this orange, almost rust color. You would think that that's early oxidation, but it's not. It's just the simple color of the vineyard and some of the fruit that comes off of it. I think it's really nice. In terms of aging, wine's drinking great right now, right? We're almost into 2025. I think this wine is going to age beautifully over the next 1, 2, 3+ years. Really, really nice. Certainly, do I think this wine's gonna be drinking well in 5? Yes. But I would say a great drinking window would be right now, but you could easily lay this down and cellar this, again, in the correct temperature for an additional 3 years, and this wine is going to get better in the next 1 to 2 years. So one of the things about the wine club is that we do hold these wines back. We give them an adequate enough amount of time in bottle before we release it to the wine club. Again, 2020, this was bottled in August of 21. So it sat in bottle for 3 years, and it's really just opening up. It's just starting to fully blossom. So I think this wine is drinking really nicely. I think it's a beautiful example of Pinot Noir from the Santa Rita Hills, from particularly a single vineyard, Donica. They have their own label now. Amazing wines. They even have a tasting room in Los Olivos. So feel free to go check them out and taste some of their selections from that vineyard to sort of get a better perspective on this vineyard in its entirety. So hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions, of course. Cheers.